Canon just announced the release of the brand new EOS R full frame mirrorless camera. This has come off the back of the recent Z series releases by Nikon, and also the increased pressure that's been mounting due to the incredible success of the full frame mirrorless cameras by Sony, the A7 and the A9. So we knew for some time that both Canon and Nikon were going to release the full frame mirrorless cameras, and now in the same month they've done so, and we're going to take a look very shortly at the specifications of this brand new Canon EOS R series camera. In addition to the announcement, they also mentioned the 4 new lenses that are fit for purpose for this camera, as well as the 3 adapters available that's going to allow you to adapt your existing EF mount lenses to the camera. Now, before we go ahead and take a look at the specifications, a quick discussion about mirrorless cameras and why you might be considering a switch over to the mirrorless format, or if you're looking to purchase your first camera, your serious professional or vlogging camera, why you would pick mirrorless over a DSLR. First of all, mirrorless cameras tend to be more lightweight and compact, which makes them easier to handle if you're out and about running and gunning, if you're doing travel photography, or if you're doing street photography, that type of work. Mirrorless cameras can be a great option. Second of all, they have the capacity to have faster frame rates for action photography. That doesn't necessarily translate into the specs, as you'll see later on, but they certainly have that ability, as they've done away with the mechanical movement of the mirror during the shutter process. So theoretically, they can achieve faster frame rates. And the last point is that typically they tend to have in-body image stabilization. However, having said that, Canon seems to have omitted this feature from the EOS R, which is quite interesting and perhaps took most of us by surprise. Certainly, I was expecting it to have in-body image stabilization. Nonetheless, they have produced a very high-end specification for this mirrorless camera, which retails at around $2,300 US. So that's going to be anywhere from around 3,100 or 3,500 Australian dollars, depending on how it translates in the end. And also the lenses are going to be rather pricey. For example, the 28 to 70 f2L USM is going to come in at around 2,999 US. Which when you put it into perspective, if you're purchasing both the body and a lens, you're going to be spending well over $5,000 or $6,000 just as a starting point, which puts it in the price category of the DSLR range of cameras. So to me, they're kind of pitching somewhere in between the professional user and the prosumer. And it's obviously a very highly featured camera, which should appeal to both segments and probably a little bit beyond the beginner, unless you have enough funds to allocate towards the purchase. But nonetheless, let's go ahead and take a look at the full details of the specifications announced during the special event. First of all, we start with a 30.3 megapixel CMOS Digic 8 full frame sensor, which is comparable to the one found on the 5D Mark IV. So that's going to give you incredibly sharp image quality and detail in both the shadows and highlights, and great performance in low light. You also get dual pixel AF, which delivers autofocus in as little as 0.05 of a second, with 5,655 AF points, and this same feature can be used to provide smooth autofocus transitions and tracking in movie mode. The EVF electronic viewfinder is OLED with 3.6 million dots, which provides you with a lifelike view of the scene. There's also a high resolution 2.1 million dot 3.15 inch vari-angle screen on the rear of the camera, with full touch control, allowing you to review images and control autofocus with ease. Vari-angle is Canon's code word for a selfie screen, as the screen flips out to the side and to the front. So this is going to be of great appeal to vloggers and video producers who need to monitor their scene from the front of the camera. In terms of video capability, it has a built-in microphone and headphone jack. It shoots 4K up to 8-bit in camera, but only at 30 frames per second. It can shoot 10-bit output via HDMI with 4.22 compression, using Canon Log for flexible editing and easy color matching with other Cinema EOS cameras. However, there's a serious crop factor when shooting 4K, which for me is a big problem. Essentially, the crop means that your lenses are magnified by 1.7 times when shooting in 4K, meaning that your 16mm wide-angle lens becomes 27mm, or a standard 50mm lens becomes 85mm, etc. So if you want to vlog in 4K, you might need to set the camera back a fair bit or consider using an EF 10 to 18mm zoom lens, etc. That leads us to the lens adapters that were announced during the event. Not one, but 3 to choose from. This is really important as anyone with an existing lineup of lenses, and one of the reasons that many photographers have avoided switching to alternate brands such as Sony, even though there were many aftermarket adapters available, you'd have to sacrifice certain features of the lens such as autofocus, auto exposure, and sometimes image stabilization. Now, Canon have come up with some great adapters that are going to allow you to integrate your existing EF lenses with ease. There is the control ring mount EF EOS R, which adapts the lens and adds a control ring, which is a user assignable ring that allows you to allocate, for example, your aperture, and you can now change it on the lens itself, which is a really nice feature. This is available on all of the R mount lenses that were announced during the presentation. I'll talk about those later. There is the drop-in filter mount adapter, which allows you to add a variable ND filter, which is great for video producers. And then there's a standard mount adapter, which just performs the basic function of adapting the EF lens onto this new R mount. All 3 will give you full autofocus, auto exposure control, and compatibility with stabilization on IS lenses. The other great thing to note about compatibility with previous equipment is the new EOS R uses the same battery as the previous generation or current generation of DSLR cameras, and is also compatible with the Canon Speedlight. So if you have this gear in your kit, you're going to be able to use it with this new camera. If you're updating to it, you can keep your old equipment. If you're adding it to your existing kit, obviously everything is interchangeable there, and that's a really good idea. There's an optional BG E22 battery grip, which will give you better grip for pro shooting situations and allow you to shoot much longer with 2 battery capacity. Similar to the recently announced Nikon Z series, the camera sports only 1 SD card slot. It's compatible with UHS 2 and UHS 1 cards for higher performance, but there is no redundancy for pro shooters. I know that a lot of photographers don't actually utilize the dual cards in redundancy mode, but certainly there are many professionals who rely on this feature, so that's going to be a significant reason not to migrate across to this format at this stage for some photographers, and it's certainly going to be off-putting for many of those looking to purchase this type of camera for the first time, wanting to enter the professional space and requiring that extra level of redundancy. From my point of view, I would like to have it in any camera that I purchase that's on the professional side, as I'd like to have the option there when I need it. Having said that, for most shoots, I tend to not use redundancy. I'll only use it in a shoot where I know that it's going to be very difficult to reshoot should I have to have any issues with the card, and that's only for the live type of work or anything that's just mission critical, which is not all that common. And certainly for video, not many cameras support redundancy via shooting to 2 cards, so it's not really a major issue for me personally. But having said that, they probably should have put 2 cards in there to appease the professionals that require this type of functionality. If you look at one of the reasons why they omitted this feature, given that the Sony a7 III includes 2 cards and has appealed to many professionals for that reason, it's probably to do with protection of their existing product lineup. So they didn't want to make this camera too highly featured and overly spec'd so as to take away sales from the 5D Mark IV and future generations of the 5D and the 1D, etc. So I guess the idea behind this camera is to provide as many professional features as possible and high-end specs without encroaching in the space of the full-frame DSLR. In terms of the new lenses, as I mentioned earlier, 4 of them were announced during the launch. There's the RF 28-70 f2L USM, the 24-105 f4 IS USM, and the 50mm f1.2 L USM, along with the RF35 f1.8 macro STM. It's interesting to note that of these new lenses, only the 24-105 and the 35mm include optical image stabilization. Given that the camera doesn't have in-body stabilization, that means that if you purchase the other lenses, you don't get the advantage of image stabilization, which is useful for video production and also for low light shooting. These are all great lenses designed to provide instant feedback to the image sensor for optimal image quality. For anyone buying into Canon for the first time, they'll provide you with the most essential focal lengths, and they indicated that there is a roadmap for numerous more lenses to come out over the coming years. So in summary, I think they've done a reasonable job at producing their first full frame mirrorless camera that's well spec'd and may be suitable for some professionals looking to add it to their existing kit. Probably not as a replacement for a DSLR altogether if you're used to shooting with a 5D Mark IV or 1DS, for example. But for a newcomer to photography, deciding between the two, it could be a good option to jump into this mirrorless format, knowing that more lenses will be released in the future and more products to go with it. And certainly if you're not in a rush to buy, I think in the future, coming 6 months to a year or two, we'll see updates to this camera body, the V2 for example, which might have some improved specifications that could make it more appealing. And I think the emission of full frame 4K video is perhaps a little bit disappointing. They could have done that better, but again, Nikon didn't do it either. But keeping in mind that Sony have put that feature into their A7 III cameras, so they probably should have considered it if they were looking to bring more users across to this brand new format of camera. Those that are interested in photography, vloggers, etc. It's got the selfie screen, so it might just hit the mark for you anyway. Having said that, I think that they could have done a little bit better. It is their first release, and I'm sure that in future generations, they're going to bring those specs up to par, at which point it might be worth considering a switch over. But for now, I'll be staying with my DSLR option, the 5D, until they make some significant improvements. Let me know what you think. Is there any particular feature you think they missed out on, they could have done better? Are there things that you love about this camera and you'd like to share with the audience? If so, feel free to put your comments in the comments box below. Thanks for watching. See you on the next video. Bye for now.